Above all else, Muad'Dib was the Kwisatz Haderach, which the Sisterhood's breeding program had sought across thousands of generations. The Kwisatz Haderach, then, the one who could be many places at once, this prophet, this man through whom the Bene Gesserit hoped to control human destiny. Frank Herbert's Dune series unfolds at a nexus of unique conditions where humanity's worst inclinations combine with carefully planted myths and prophecies to facilitate the rise and worship of a manufactured Messiah. The organization responsible for this religious engineering is the Sisterhood of the Bene Gesserit, who has carried on for thousands of years meticulously sifting humans, monitoring bloodlines, and preserving the most valuable genetic traits in order to produce a super being that would act as a messianic leader for the manipulated masses. It is through this one being that the Sisterhood would then guide the course of humanity's future. In this video, I'd like to examine the Bene Gesserit's efforts to produce the Kwisatz Haderach and how this manufactured Messiah was designed to capture the allegiance of the known universe and subsequently dictate the fate of humanity. Spoiler warning if you are unfamiliar with Frank Herbert's Dune. As an institution, the Bene Gesserit have secretly manipulated the political, social, and commercial powers of the Empire for many thousands of years. By the skillful and subtle use of their seemingly witch-like abilities, the Sisterhood has long established a network of influence with many of their members installed in or near positions of power throughout the Imperium. Through this network, the Sisterhood was able to oversee the spread of infectious superstitions, prophecies, and legends known as the Panoplia Propheticus. The Bene Gesserit members who were tasked with performing this religious engineering belonged to the black arm of the Sisterhood called the Missionaria Protectiva. Each collection of prophecies or superstitions that were seeded throughout the universe varied depending on the nature and level of advancement of a given culture or society. It was often the case that members of the Sisterhood could assume roles within their carefully crafted prophecies in order to gain a protected status in especially dangerous environments. This religious engineering would serve to assist the Bene Gesserit order in preparing the Empire for the arrival and ultimately help with the masses' acceptance of the Kwisatz Haderach as their leader. This being would possess tremendous abilities far greater than the Imperium had seen previously. He would wield the ancestral memories of a Bene Gesserit Reverend Mother, the supreme analytical and calculating abilities of a Mentat, and prescient foresight far greater than that of a Spacing Guild navigator. The capacity to navigate this kind of expansion of consciousness required a very special individual with the ability to understand and use higher-order dimensions as he attempted to accurately interpret, calculate, and manipulate the threads of the future. This is where their long-running genetics program came into play. Through selective breeding, the Bene Gesserit worked for thousands of years to achieve the ideal blend of genetic traits within a singular being who would be the most naturally inclined to possess enhanced mental capabilities. While Paul Atreides ended up becoming the first being known as a Kwisatz Haderach, the Bene Gesserit had actually intended their Messiah to come one generation later. Prior to the events of Dune, the Sisterhood had been monitoring the bloodlines of House Atreides for more than 1,000 years. For almost 2,000 years, the Sisterhood understood the supreme importance of the gene markers passed on to Lady Jessica, Bene Gesserit concubine to Duke Leto Atreides. The Bene Gesserit had initially planned for a union between an Atreides daughter and the heir of House Harkonnen, Feyd-Rautha. Their offspring was to be the Kwisatz Haderach. However, due to Jessica's disobedience, this being arrived a generation sooner, and with the Atreides' assignment to the stewardship of Arrakis, the Sisterhood quickly perceived the nature of this trap and the certain demise of Duke Leto. Shortly before the Atreides departed from their homeworld of Caladan, the Reverend Mother tested Paul to see if he truly had the potential to be the Kwisatz Haderach. In an effort to preserve the precious bloodlines of the Atreides, the Reverend Mother informed Jessica of preparations that had been made on Dune to ensure the survival of her and her son. After their arrival on the desert planet, Jessica quickly became aware of the immense depth of indoctrination that had been performed on the local Fremen people. The Missionaria Protectiva's carefully implanted superstitions had detailed the coming of the Lisan al-Gaib, a prescient son of a Bene Gesserit. In fact, the Sisterhood's influence on the Fremen's religion was so deep that the phrase Kwisatz Haderach was known among their people to mean a shortening of the way, which references a prophecy of a Messiah, the Mahdi, who would lead their people to paradise. To the Bene Gesserit, however, that same term means one who can be many places at once. Due in large part to Lady Jessica's masterful efforts in manipulating the Fremen people and taking full advantage of their prophetic suspicions, both she and Paul were able to secure a place of concealment in the deep desert from their imperial enemies. After their induction into the tribe of Stilgar, the Fremen quickly began to recognize Paul as their prophesied Messiah. Paul's own latent psychic abilities, along with his Bene Gesserit training, allowed him to capitalize on the Fremen's beliefs and become their leader. Over the next 2 years, Paul worked to unite the various Fremen tribes under one banner, creating the most powerful military force in the known universe. In the name of Muad'Dib, the Fremen were successful in defeating the combined forces of the Harkonnens and the Emperor's mighty Sardaukar. With each subsequent victory in their war for Arrakis, the zeal of the Fremen grew, diminishing any hope for the Bene Gesserit to gain control of the young Atreides Duke. Paul then forced the Emperor's abdication and took his place on the Golden Lion throne. The Fremen, galvanized by their belief in Paul as the Mahdi, then spread out across the universe like an uncontrollable wildfire, seeking to conquer other planets and spread their religion. This jihad resulted in the death of billions, crippling the power structure of the Imperium, which the Sisterhood had so carefully infiltrated. Ultimately, the hubris of the Bene Gesserit turned out to be a primary reason for their failure to manufacture a Messiah that would submit to their governance. Because they had long since achieved and carefully maintained a seemingly superhuman level of control, both as individuals and as an organization, the Sisterhood concluded that even if he arrived a generation early, this super being would have to bend to their formidable powers of influence. They felt that their collected lifetimes of female memories granted them a wisdom above all others. Therefore, they assumed that he would carry out their agenda. However, they failed to appreciate the undying sense of loyalty and justice within House Atreides, nor did they truly understand the power of perspective provided by the trinocular vision of a Kwisatz Haderach. These factors led to this Messiah's condemnation of their order and rejection of their plans to guide the future of the Imperium. But I'm curious to know what you think of the Sisterhood's work to manufacture a Messiah. Are there any lessons to be learned from their religious engineering efforts and subsequent failure to produce a super being that they could control? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you did, and be sure to subscribe for more Dune and other sci-fi and fantasy news and lore. Thank you all so much for your support, and as always, have a very nerdy day.